finally tonight, the joy of building, and Teres Suarez.
The prestigious American Institute of Architects Gold Medal was presented this weekend to Mexico's most renowned architect, Ricardo Legorreta. The award, the highest honor the AIA bestows on an individual, recognizes an architect whose significant body of work has had a lasting influence on the theory and practice of architecture. Legorreta, the 57th AIA Gold Medalist, joins the ranks of Frank Lloyd Wright, I.M. Pei, and 1999 medal recipient Frank Gehry, names etched into the Wall of Honor located in the lobby of the AIA's headquarters in Washington, D.C. Born in Mexico City in 1931, Legorreta went on to study architecture at UNAM, the Universidad Nacional Autónoma de México. In 1959, Legorreta started his own architectural firm, Legorreta Arquitectos, and since its opening, the architect has worked extensively in Mexico and the southwestern United States. His early projects include the Camino Real Hotel in Mexico City, designed in 1968. In this work, the architect's design keeps intact the traditions of Mexican and southwestern architecture. For centuries, Hispanic builders have used water as a building material. It is incorporated into courtyards and patios, in pools and fountains. Here, Ricardo Legorreta used water in an unconventional way in a hotel lobby. Legorreta's first commission outside of Mexico was the residence of Hollywood actor Ricardo Montalban, with its stunning view of the Los Angeles basin. During the 40-year span of his career, some of Legorreta's most celebrated works include the Metropolitan Cathedral in Managua, Nicaragua, and the Monterrey Central Library in Monterrey, Mexico. Legorreta's signature integration of landscape and building is found in his 1985 design for the Renault factory in Durango, Mexico. But there's also a sense of humor to Legorreta's work. Take, for example, the large watermelon slices at the Camino Real Iztapa Hotel. They're the less obvious geometric shapes, cutouts and columns designed to playfully interplay shadow and light here at the San Antonio Main Library. Legorreta's use of water, walls, and light-filled spaces has set him apart. But most of all, Legorreta's work stresses color. Legorreta remains busy in his native Mexico, while the demand for his work in the U.S. increases.
And Ricardo Legorreta joins us now. Well, as exciting as it is to get an award anytime, it must be especially nice to get one from your peers.
It's very special. To get the recognition from your colleagues is much significant than anything else.
When you design a building, do you want people to be paying a lot of attention to the building, or do you want it to work so well with them that they don't even notice it so much?
I want them to be very happy. I think if the building calls the attention is another thing. The most important thing for the building and for architecture is really to understand that our profession is to make life of the people more pleasant, not imposing our ideas, but really understanding what it's all about, the building.
So how does the architect in his studio with his drafting tools on his table understand human happiness? Do you have to go out and be with people?
Oh, of course, yes, you have to go out. At least each one of us has a different way of doing things. But I personally, I want to understand people for whom we are designing. And very often, and more often and often, we, during the design process, we work together not only with the client, but with the users. And in a house, in a home, of course, you get with the client and the user, which is the owner. When you are in another type of building, such as a library, school, or wherever, we start to talk about people, and I don't like that. I want to really get together with them, have their reactions to the sign, and to really understand what they want out of the building.
Because you designed a children's museum in your native country, Mexico, and a lot of things that are designed for children are sort of an adult's idea of what children would like, rather than what a child's idea of what children would like.
Well, I'm glad you put that example. That's a very good example of what you're talking about. Every time we adults talk about children, we immediately draw a little house with the fireplace and the smoke going out. And that's not the idea of the children. In that museum, what I thought was the important thing is to offer the kids the possibility of dream, to feel free, and to have the space belonging to them. And fortunately, we have found out that they love it. They love to go again and again, to feel they know the buildings, the building itself. Even we did some things, some parts of the building in which only they can get in. The parents can't. And that has developed that idea of property for them, of freedom. There is no order on the museum. They can run back and forth, etc. So that's a good example of trying to understand the users of the building.
Now, we're in Washington, D.C., a city where there are many buildings that are saying to the street, I am serious. And one of the ways that they say I am serious is by being all one color, often white, marble, cold, solid material. Let's talk a little bit about materials and color.
Well, it depends very much on the environment. One important thing, I will go back a little bit, is that I believe that we have to respect the environment. If there's something I think we architects have to do now, is to really devote our time and effort to do better cities, not only outstanding buildings. So the first thing is to react to the environment. And that doesn't mean to fall into an anonymous thing. If it fits correctly a very simple thing, you should do the very simple. If it's the case of a specific building, you have to do it. Light is very different. I was looking at Washington this morning with the snow. Even if it's bright, it's a complete different light of what you can find in California or in Mexico. So that's again a reaction. Culture also has to do with, let's say, Mexico is a country of color. So to use color in Mexico, sometimes I say that we are almost irresponsible in the use of color. To use color in the East Coast is completely another thing.
So a building in Mexico that would have roses and pinks and turquoise blues, if you were doing it for Boston, you wouldn't use those?
I will use different colors, and I will use it very carefully. We are doing the students' residence for the University of Chicago. And it's very interesting because they are asking us for color, but at the same time, we want to respect Chicago and not just arrive there and say, here we are the Mexicans, we are our bold colors. And that goes for materials, I think. It has to represent the philosophy of the building.
When you build on a greenfield site where there's no other building, you can do one kind of thing. But what about on a block where there are already many other buildings and there's just a lot? How much does that building have to speak to the other buildings on the street?
It has to speak 100%. I think it's a mistake in that case, which is very common, to come and say, now I'm going to do a building that is completely different on the block. Because you don't have the right of changing the environment just because. A very good example is every time we talk about the cities we like, and let's say we talk about beautiful Barcelona, to put an example, outside of Mexico and outside of the United States. And the value of Barcelona are those streets which are very simple, very humble. It has certain specific buildings that are, you find Gaudi and that. But the rest, the city is just that city of the 20s that was based in a very regular block. And that's what makes a city. So I think that just because you want to do a very outstanding building in the middle of a block in just one lot and then hurt the other properties, I think is a mistake. We have to respect our neighbors.
Recently in the United States, a lot of architects have talked about the separation that exists between architects and the people who walk by their buildings, who use their buildings, who live and work in their buildings. Now that we're in this new century, and as someone who's been at this a long time, 40 years, do you feel that that gap is narrowing, that architects are ready to build buildings, build places that respond to people's desires more?
Yes, I see a movement towards that. I think we hit the top of that attitude some years ago. Especially the young people are much more willing to design buildings to really connect with the people, and even the top architects also. And I see that reaction. I'm an optimistic by nature, and I see that movement coming in, which I think is the right thing to do. I don't think architecture should belong to an elite and that we design for us. Sometimes I say that women dress for women and architects design for architects.
Well, you've done all kinds of things: museums, factories, libraries, private residences. Are there any projects that you are still waiting for a chance to do that you haven't had a chance to do yet?
Yes, there are some. I want to keep going, but there is one particular one that I'm really interested on it, which is affordable housing. The reason is because we talk about that always, that it has to be cheap and ugly, and that we don't want to get involved because politics and promotion and all that plays a very important role. To me, that's an excuse. We all go for inspiration to the hill towns in Italy, to the villages in Mexico, and those were affordable housing. So I think that that's a problem I would like to get involved, even if it means a tremendous effort. But that's the real problem of the world.
And a real challenge for an architect, because to keep the costs modest and make something beautiful at the same time and easily used is very difficult.
But that's the real challenge. To have an open budget is not easy. It's a danger. It's a possibility of making a lot of mistakes. So I prefer those limitations. So that's one of the things I would like very much to get involved.
Well, thank you very much for being here.
It's my pleasure. Thank you very much for inviting me.